Hello everybody, in this video I'm going to be going over the lists that have just been released by the 2018 version of Kono Light Novel ga Sugoi. Now, this began publication back in 2005. It is a publication that polls fans as well as industry insiders and then comes up with the top 10 list of light novels for the year. They also do other lists as well as like the top 10 illustrators. They do top 10 male characters, top 10 female characters, top 10 characters overall. And in the 2017 edition, they started splitting the light novel list into two. One that was based on the Bunkobon format, which is pretty much akin to our mass markets. So smaller, less expensive. And then the other list is dedicated to the light novels that come out in the Tankoubon format. And that is a it's a larger format. I mean, it's generally what we would consider a novel, so like a trade paperback or a hardcover. So a little bit more expensive, little higher quality print paper. And so they decided to split these lists in two. I can only suspect that it's because they sort of figured that one being a bit more expensive meant that there was sort of a less of an audience for it. So to make it more fair, I also kind of wonder if it's just like a whole sort of marketing commercial thing, because if you take a look at the listings in Kono Light Novel ga Sugoi over the years, you'll see a very definitive pattern occurring. Basically, light novels that appear on the list, if they don't already have an anime, usually will end up with one. You also see a spike in sales. A good chunk of them end up becoming prime for licensing into other languages. So we can argue probably back and forth about just how accurate a rating the list is in this publication, but it really doesn't take away from the fact that it is very influential and a lot of people are looking to see just what is going to appear. So in this video, I'm going to go over both lists, the Bunkobon and the Tankoubon. Now, what I'm going to be doing is the top 10 list that is including industry insiders. And then when I get to the number one of that list, I will talk about the top two that came out of the lists that were just based off of fan votes, because they also do that. They give you a list of just what the fans voted for. And it's a little bit interesting to see where those things vary and so forth, but I thought I'd just keep it to the top two titles, because this is probably going to be a long video as it is, because I'm going to be going over 20 different light novels in this one. Now, as far as I understand it, in order to qualify for a placement in Kono Light Novel ga Sugoi, a series has to release at least one volume in the voting period. So if there's certain series that you're kind of like, I thought this was a huge series and it's been on the list before, why is it not there this year? Well, it very well could be that it just didn't release a volume in that printing period. So with all that said, let's get into the list. And so I'm going to start off with the Bunkobon list. Now, if a title was in the top 10 last year, I'll tell you where it placed, just so you can get an idea of sort of whether it's moved up or down, and I'll give you a little rough idea about what each of these series is about. Now, with the top 10 of the Bunkobon list, only 4 of these titles appeared in the top 10 last year, and of these 10 that are on the list this year, 5 of them have been licensed in English. So again, like I was saying, it gives you kind of a good benchmark on figuring out just sort of what potentially, if it hasn't already been licensed, what we may very well see in the future. So at number 10, A Sister's All You Need. This one is written by Yomi Hirasaka. It has 8 volumes in Japan. It began publication March 18th of 2015. Now this has been licensed for an official release in English by Yen On, but volume 1 has not come out yet. It is currently scheduled for a May 2018 release, and there is an anime that is on Crunchyroll right now this season, so again, kind of gives you an idea of where things are going. Surrounded by many different kinds of company, our protagonist, hopeless cis-con light novelist Hashima Itsuki. First-class genius and lover, the high-end unfortunate beauty, Kani Nayuta. Troubled about love, troubled about friendships, troubled even in her dreams, Victor of the Three Crowns, Shirakawa Miyako. Brutal tax saber, Ono Ashley. Natural-born illustrator, Puri Ketsu. Each and every one as hesitant as the next, and each and every one dealing with their own headaches. This is a busy story of a group of bewildering characters that plays games together, takes trips together, and works together, never a single dull day. Watching over them is the kind and thoughtful, completely perfect, superhuman little brother of Itsuki, Chihiro, with a huge secret of his own. Now, I'm going to admit that I was just watching a video that Gigik put out on his channel about this fall's anime that are out, and he had a little bit of this one, and it looks very much like what they've done is animated some of the works of the light novel character, and they are way, like, he eats his sister's panties at one point, like, how? I don't know. I'm like afraid that it's kind of taken Arrow manga sensei trash to like the nth level. I'm really not too sure. However, I did read an article that made it sound like, you know, beneath that, if you can get beyond it, that at its heart, this is a tale about a bunch of sort of like, you know, very, very late teens, early 20s, people coming into adulthood and sort of trying to figure out basically how to adult. So to an extent, it sounds like this could be kind of an interesting sort of moving to the next phase of your life story. At the same time, it may just be too dressed up with cis-con perversion for me to really enjoy. I'm not too sure. I will be checking this one out when it releases in May because, well, I try my best to read at least one volume from all of the series that get released, so I have an idea of what they're about, and I can share that with all of you as well. At number 9, Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon?, which is written by Fujino Omori. There are currently 13 volumes in Japan. Now, actually there's 12 available. The 13th is coming out in February. This began publication January 12th of 2013, and it is licensed for English release by Yen On, and they're releasing volume 10 in English in December. So we're not that far behind. Like, we're only like 3 volumes behind on this one. And chances are, well before volume 14 comes out in Japan, we'll have at least volume 11, if not even volume 12. So we're getting there with this series. Now, this one, of course, is a fantasy series about a young boy named Bell who travels to the grand labyrinth city of Orario in order to travel into the labyrinth and become an adventurer and to sort of fulfill this heroic notion that he has of being a hero. It is probably one of my favorite series. It is one of those series that every single volume just seems to be either as good, if not progressively better than the ones before. It has done an excellent job of striking a balance between being funny, having a lot of heart, but also introducing a lot of far more mature themes and taking a look at some of the darker sides of this whole sort of adventure-based society. So it's a really, really good series. If you like fantasy, it's always one that I recommend. I'm not really surprised at all that it's on the list, although I am kind of surprised that it wasn't in the top 10 last year, but I mean, I have no idea if that's because of the release schedule of volumes. I'm not too sure, but last year it didn't rank at all in the top 10. I'm kind of glad to see it there this year. At number 8, we have Gamers. The author is Sakina Aoi. Last year it was at number 7, so it's actually dropped down 1. There are 9 volumes in Japan, and that'll be as of January. The 9th volume is coming out in January of 2018. It began publication March 20th of 2015. It has had an anime that Crunchyroll aired, and currently there is no official English license for this series. The romantic comedy light novel series centers on the gaming lives of various high school students who play video games, including Keita Amano, a lonely young man who loves video games, Karen Tendo, the beautiful president of the video game club, Chiaki Hoshinomori, who constantly fights with Keita, and Tasuku Uehara, who puts on a facade of being satisfied with his life in the real world, but he, in truth, also loves playing video games. This is one of those series that I thought for sure we might get licensed, but just like High School DD that seems to be quite popular, it's published by Fujimi Shobu. Now, Fujimi Shobu, they are a subsidiary of Karakoa. Now, I thought for sure that we would get books from them, but for whatever reason, if you take a look at a lot of really big titles like Data Live, Gamers, High School DD, the list goes on and on, they're all published by Fujimi Shobu. And when you look it up online, they were one of the very first publishers that really got behind Tokyo Pop in the sort of early 2000s, in that first wave of attempts at releasing light novels in English. And Tokyo Pop folded right like early in publication of a number of the titles. Some of the titles they got about 2/3 of the way through and then just kind of washed their hands of it. And so a lot of people have theorized that because of that, Fujimi has been very hesitant to let their novels get released, or even maybe their authors who remember that whole thing are hesitant to let their novels get released. So I don't know if that's necessarily true. I don't know if that's the be-all and end-all of all this, but it is kind of interesting that with a lot of really big titles that there's a lot of fan demand for to come out in English, they all seem to eventually lead back to Fujimi Shobu. Now, again, I'm just throwing this out there because I find it interesting, but I don't have any answers and I can't even tell you how we go about fixing it. I guess all we can really hope is that with light novels becoming increasingly successful being translated into English, and as we are seeing the successful completion of series, maybe that will convince more and more publishers to get on board and allow their works to get translated, because they'll feel more secure that those titles will get treated in the way that they deserve and that they will get a full release. At number 7, Jaku-Chara Tomozaki-kun, which is written by Yuki Yaku. It's also known as the low-tier character Tomozaki-kun. Last year it was number 8, so it's moved up 1 rank. There are 5 volumes in Japan. Funny enough, the 5th volume I just talked about in this week's top 10 best-selling light novels in Japan, because it just released and was up there on the list. It began publication May 18th of 2016. Currently, of course, no official English license. This is a walkthrough of life, a crappy video game. Life is a bad video game. This cliche phrase is sadly a reality. However, life doesn't even have simple, easy rules. What it does have is irrationality and inequality. The strong say that they have a lot of freedom, but the weak have no choice but to live an overwhelmingly disadvantaged lifestyle. Therefore, it's a crap game. There's no mistake, because I, the best gamer in Japan, declare it to be crap. However, that person who is on the same level as me goes around saying, life is a great game. The school's perfect strong-willed heroine, Hinami Aoi. Furthermore, I'll teach you the rules of life. Normally, I wouldn't believe in those words. However, Hinami is a character that doesn't even fit in a normal frame at all. From the winner of the 10th Shogakukan Light Novel Award for Excellence, a Jaku-Chara takes on life's strategy guide, but with instruction from a Bishoujo. Now, like I said in the top 10 video, I'd actually really like to see this. We've had a lot of light novels translated into English that dealt with people in the normal world being inserted into video games or into worlds that seem to operate on video game principles. I think it would be really fun to see a light novel that takes just normal everyday life, but tries to do better at living by applying game rules and game ideals. And that's what it sounds like this series is, which I would really like to see. I've often talked about the fact that I wish we could see more slice-of-life novels, and I think that this would be a really good fit in English, and it just sounds like it's a lot of fun. I'd really like to check this one out. At number 6, Bokutachi no Remake. This one by Nachi Kyo. It's also known as Remake Our Life. There are 3 volumes in Japan. It began publication March 25th of 2017. Of course, there's no official English license. This one, there's actually surprisingly not a lot to find on it in English, but generally what I get the gist of it is that it is about a adult male who works at a game development company, and the company goes bust. And so, of course, very down on his luck, feeling like his life is falling apart, goes home, falls asleep, and when he wakes up, he's actually 10 years in the past, just as he's about to enter into university. And so he kind of determines that since this seems to be more than just a dream, that he is going to try and live life the way that he had always wished he had, so that he will end up in a better place. We often talk about light novels being wish fulfillment. Often we apply that to things like, say, Sword Art Online, where Kirito is this kind of scrawny gamer kid who becomes the ultimate hero and is surrounded by beautiful, capable, intelligent women. And I mean, there's all sorts of different levels of wish fulfillment. There's revenge fulfillment, they're against bullies and all that kind of stuff. This one really seems to be that wish fulfillment of, man, if I could just go back to when I was, insert age here, knowing what I know now, I would have done this. And I think that's the sort of itch that this book scratches, which perhaps is why it's a little bit more popular. I'm kind of surprised in a way that this is a Bunkobon type novel. It strikes me more that it would be aimed at an older audience, because I think that sort of desire for that wish fulfillment would be a lot stronger in an older audience who would probably be more likely to buy a Tankoubon. But for whatever reason, this is where it is, but it is still doing well, obviously, being at number 6 in the top 10. Speaking of that one infamous series, at number 5, we have Sword Art Online, of course, by Reki Kawahara. This one was number 2 last year, so it slid down at least 3 spots. I really don't need to tell you all what this is about, right? There are 20 volumes in Japan. It began publication April 10th of 2009. It is licensed for English release by Yen On. They'll be releasing volume 12 in December, so we're 8 volumes behind, but you know, we're getting there. Now, volume 20, which is the most recent volume that was released for Sword Art Online in Japan, represented the end of the work that Kawahara had published on the web novel websites. So a lot of people kind of thought that that would be the end, but there's been a lot of talk that Kawahara is going to continue the series forward. And, well, I mean, you can hardly blame the guy. It is like a money machine. I mean, it's been in the top 10 list on Kono light novel ga Sugoi for years. It is consistently very highly ranked in fan polls. Anime after anime after anime, merchandise after merchandise. I mean, even like volume number 20, which was part 2 of like a side story, even that one sold over 200,000 copies for the time that it was in the top 10 best-selling of the week in light novels in Japan. It's still selling copies. I mean, now it's just not in the top 10 anymore, but I mean, it's still making money. So I'm not surprised even a little bit to see this series in the top 10. In a way, I'm almost kind of glad that it's sort of in the middle of the pack, though, only because I kind of want to see newer series getting their fair share and sort of, you know, these newer and more interesting ideas coming along and taking over from these old guard series that have been around for a good number of years and kind of ruled things for a while. I kind of like to see some fresh blood in there. So I'm glad to see it at number 5. I'm no way surprised it's in the top 10. At number 4, Tsuki to Raika to Nosferatu. This is by Keisuke Masano. There are 2 volumes in Japan. It began publication December 20th, 2016, so it is a very recent series. No official English license, obviously. And to be honest, not very much to be found in terms of a synopsis. On Reddit, when this list was posted just in the past couple days, somebody said, "What is this thing even about?" And people were like, "It's about a vampire girl going to space and meeting a boy on the moon." Which didn't say a whole lot, so I did a little bit of translation work, and it, of course, all comes out junk because, you know, mechanical robotic translation. But generally, the gist seems to be it's like an alt-reality type story where it is detailing the space race to try and get the first human being into space. And in this particular republic or whatever, they have decided that instead of using just normal humans, they are going to use vampires, which in a way kind of makes sense when you consider just like how much a stronger constitution vampires have over humans. So I guess it makes sense. And so the story is mainly about this teenaged female vampire. I don't know if she's really a teenager or if she's just like an older vampire who looks like a teenage girl. Could go either way. It focuses on her, and she is the first candidate who is set to launch into space. And as I said from Reddit, it makes it sound like she goes into space and meets a young boy on the moon, but I don't really get that out of the Google translation, so I really can't say for sure. But basically all you need to know is it's combining like alt reality with the space race with vampires. So I think it sounds kind of cool. I mean, it's certainly a very different idea, and using vampires, I would say, in a very different idea. I mean, we've had space vampires before, like, you know, aliens that seemed like vampires that started attacking people, but not really like the other way around, that they're vampires from Earth being used to accomplish this grand goal kind of thing. So sounds like an interesting series to me. This was not in the top 10 last year, so obviously, well, I mean, it's brand new, basically. It just started in December of 2016. So seems quite popular that it sort of made this initial splash. I think it sounds cool, and like I said, it's one of those things where I think it's cool because it's a very different kind of idea, and it's doing well, which is, I think, something that when you're reading a lot of light novels, and particularly when a lot of them fall into sort of very similar genres and stuff, it is very exciting to see stuff that's new. At number 3, we have Infinite Dendrogram. Now this is by Sakon Kaido. There are 5 volumes in Japan. It began publication October 29th of 2016, and it is licensed for English release by J Novel Club, currently only available in ebook format. Volume 4 is being released in English January of 2018, so we are going to catch up to this one. And in fact, J Novel seems to be that really sort of, I think it's because they don't do print releases. They pump out like a new volume like maybe every 2 months, and more of their series are finishing or they're catching up to Japanese releases. So I mean, it's exciting for one thing. Like, it's not like Japan is so far ahead that it feels like we'll never catch up. And, you know, you're getting sort of a consistent release of these works. So it is a really great thing. I really love J Novel Club, and they've picked up a lot of really good titles. This one is a really good title as well. I'll get into what it's about. I've reviewed the first 2 volumes so far, and I was impressed, particularly given that it is another in the long line of main character playing a VR MMO RPG type stories. So in this one, in the year 2043, Infinite Dendrogram, the world's first successful full dive VR MMO, was released. In addition to its ability to perfectly simulate the 5 senses, along with its many other amazing features, the game promised to offer players a world full of infinite possibilities. Nearly 2 years later, soon-to-be college freshman Reiji Mukudori is finally able to buy a copy of the game and start playing. With some help from his experienced older brother Shu and his partner Embryo, Reiji embarks on an adventure into the world of Infinite Dendrogram. Just what will he discover and encounter in this game world known for its incredible realism and infinite possibilities? Now, I've said it when I've reviewed this book that one of the things I really like about it is that for me as a gamer, I love RPGs. I played a lot of open world RPGs, like Skyrim and all these kind of series. And the thing that always kind of struck me was well, there was a number of things. First of all, that the worlds, what kind of bothered me, particularly in online MMOs, is how impermanent the world is. You can do this incredible thing and change the world, and when you log in an hour, everything is back to what it was because they have to reset it for the next player. Infinite Dendrogram begins to address this idea of you can play the game any way you want, you can do whatever you want. The world will change, and will change forever because of what you do. If you decide to kill an NPC, they will stay dead forever. They're gone. Finished. Nobody will ever get a quest from them again. Nobody will talk to them again. They will not just respawn at some point. None of them are immortal. Any NPC can be killed. It is very enticing in a way as a gamer to me. And I think that's one of the things that really brought me into it. And the other thing that I've really enjoyed, and like I said, it's just the first 2 volumes I've read, is that it is dealing with this whole idea of you can play the game in very different ways, and it addresses some very dark things that could happen potentially in a game where it mimics reality. It's just one of those series that you have to read if you're interested in that kind of thing. It reads very much like a very fantasy type series. I've really enjoyed the first 2 volumes. In fact, I've got volume 3. I'm hoping to have it read before volume 4 comes out in January. I'm actually really happy to see this one on the list. Just because, like I said, it's a newer series and it's really decent. And I'd like to see it succeed. So I'm happy to see it on the top 10 this list. It was not on the top 10 last year, so yeah, it's had a real burst in popularity, it seems. At number 2, 86 by Asato Asato. There are 2 volumes in Japan. It began publication February 10th of 2017. There's, of course, no official English language translation or license at this point. It did not appear in the top 10 last year. The Republic of San Magnolia. For a long time, this country was attacked by its neighbor, the Empire, which created a series of unmanned military vehicles called the Legion. In response to the threat, the Republic successfully completes the development of similar technology and reflects the enemy's attack, having managed to do so without casualties. But this is the official version. In fact, there were victims. Outside of the 85 districts of the Republic, there was actually another one, the non-existent 86th district. It was there that battles continued day and night, in which young men and women from the detachment known as 86 participated. They fought in drones. Shin is the leader of a squadron of 86ers. Lena is a handler who commands the detachment from the remote rear with the help of special communication technology. The farewell story of the severe and sad struggle of these 2 begins. So this one sounds very much like a dark sort of combat type story. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like Heavy Objects, just in terms of that whole tone of using like mechanized weapons and stuff like that. On Reddit, a number of people were saying it's quite a dark series and that if you have a problem with characters dying, then you probably should skip it. To me, it kind of entices me. Like, I'd like to see something like this. It sounds very, very different. Again, it's that kind of difference that excites me. So again, it's kind of cool to me to see a series like this getting into the top 10, particularly placing so high at number 2, because it isn't really like anything else that is really, really, like it's not an isekai or even like a romantic comedy. It's something very different, a little bit darker. I would really like to read this series, actually. I can only hope that we get this one. Finally, at number 1, The Ryuo's Work is Never Done. This written by Shiratori Shiro. Now, it was also number 1 last year. There are 7 volumes in Japan as of January 2018, so 7th volume is coming out in January. Began publication September 12th, 2015. And now this is licensed for English release by Bookwalker. They currently have 1 volume available, and you can only get the official English release in ebook format from Bookwalker. It's totally an exclusive deal for their website. I have read and reviewed the first volume and had incredibly mixed feelings about it. If you've watched the channel and watched all of my reviews, then you watched that one, you probably know. The first volume really tries in the very beginning to pull you in by making you believe that something sexual is happening between a 16-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl. And that kind of turned me off right away. And the continued sort of lolicon type action, it seemed a little too much, especially when there is kind of this sweet story about, the story is about a teenage boy. He's 16 years old. He is a professional shogi player. And if you're not familiar, shogi, probably the closest Western equivalent would be chess. At 16, he becomes the Ryuo, which is a master rank. But he starts losing because he's basically being crushed by the weight of his own title. And then he encounters this 9-year-old girl who shows up out of the blue and is basically like, you promised to teach me and be my master at shogi. And her sort of inexperience and yet youthful exuberance and excitement starts to kind of spark in him what he used to love about shogi and kind of bring him back to life. And it's sweet when it's being completely platonic and not trying to be naughty. And I liked that part. And the shogi actual battles were well written and, were easily understood even if you're not very familiar with the game. So I thought there were a lot of plus points to it, but there was just this, I didn't like the dirty bits. They weren't necessary, I think, as part of what bothered me about it. Like, if the whole thing had just been like naughty siscon right from beginning to end kind of trash, then probably wouldn't have been too bothered by it. But it was just the fact that it was the very first thing out of the gate that it was kind of like, hey, you like naughty stuff with the little girls. So I got to be honest, it kind of bothers me that this is number 1, especially when I see some of these other series that are on this list. And I think like, the number of times I've just said in this video, like, that sounds cool. That sounds awesome. I'd love to read that. And then I get to this and then kind of like, so yeah, I'm really not sold on this series. Now, that said, I've only read the first volume. And this list, of course, is based on votes by people who have probably kept up with series. So maybe this series becomes something that I don't know about. Maybe it started off with the naughty bits, but just becomes increasingly amazing and a really intricate life story. I don't know. And I mean, in a way, I really hope it does. So there could very well be stuff about this series that I don't know, but just based on my limited experience, I just don't see the number 1 ranking, especially 2 years in a row. I just don't see it. If you know more about it, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Now, for interest's sake, number 2 of the fan vote, if we just eliminate all of the industry's part and just focus on fan votes, number 2 was The Ryuo's Work Is Never Done. Number 1 was, wait for it, I bet you can't guess, it's Sword Art Online. How many of you guessed? I bet you all figured that out. So again, like I was saying, it's Sword Art. When you get to the fans, man, Sword Art Online. Like, there's really nothing else to say. And I'm not saying that I think Sword Art is an amazing series that deserves a crap ton of accolades. I'm just saying that the people who love Sword Art love it. And they don't care what the haters say. And they don't even care if the anime botched certain storylines or whatever. It doesn't matter. The series always does well. And it really doesn't surprise me to see it coming out on top in the fan votes. Hello, everybody. This is just a short note. In terms of the Kono light novel ga Sugoi video, I initially recorded this and meant for it to be one long video, but believe it or not, my computer really couldn't handle rendering a video that ended up being over an hour long. So I'm sitting here now editing it, having recorded all this footage, and I have to split it into 2 videos. So that's why I'm wearing a different shirt and everything, because I am just shooting these little introductions and exits just so that you understand why it sounds like I'm only doing 1 video, but in reality, if you want to see the whole thing, you've got to watch 2. So thank you so much for joining me in the Bunkobon top 10 video. I am going to be uploading part 2, which will cover the Tankoubon list, and that will be uploaded at the exact same time. I'll make it very clear what's what. So just again, I'm sorry if there's any confusion, and I'm sorry that I rambled on so long that I really couldn't compress this into 1 video. So I hope you're enjoying this, and I hope you continue to enjoy part 2. Thanks again for joining me. If you're brand new to the channel and you love light novels, you should consider subscribing. I do 2 to 3 reviews every week, as well as a top 10 countdown of the best-selling light novels in Japan. I also do videos like this when special occasions come along. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.